Hi, this is Jessica Williams with The Lens, and this is the District 6 Orleans Parish School Board Candidate Forum. The Lens is teaming up with WWNO-FM to host these candidate forums. We'll host one for each district so candidates can get the chance to share their views, especially with their potential constituents in mind, and so they get to talk to each other. First up, we have Jason Coleman, a third-generation member of the Coleman Cab Company family and a Democratic Party official. Second up, we have Woody Koppel, a real estate broker and the District 6 incumbent, also a former Orleans Parish School Board president. Thank you guys so much for coming out today.
Thanks for having us.
So let's just get right to the questions. The very first question I have deals with Orleans Parish School Board governance. I want to know from you both, and I'll start with you, Jason, if you think that the Orleans Parish School Board should ever be allowed to run more schools traditionally. Why or why not?
Well, number one, I think we do have some traditional schools who are still performing well. However, in the current landscape and the autonomy of the administration, I think it's best interest of the organizations and alumni and communities to look into why or if it would be beneficial for them to be a charter. Currently, as Vice President of McDonough 35 alumni, who is a traditional run school, we are looking at the feasibility or the autonomy-wise to be able to look at administrations and the administrators to be able to bring us back to the college preparatory system that we had before. So I think it's on a case-by-case basis, but I do think over time people will make that commitment to charters so that they can own and operate their schools as they feel fit. So I think, yes, we will have some traditional, but I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we may be the first school district with 100% charter schools in the United States of America.
Woody, what about you?
Well, I think the Orleans Parish School Board over the past 4 years has done a good job of reforming what was a problem with the Orleans Parish school system. And if you look at our traditionally run schools, those schools have continued to thrive. But in addition to that, the Orleans Parish School Board plays a role as the auditor of charter schools. And I think we've done a good job of holding our charters accountable, holding them to high standards, and I think the results speak for themselves.
Would you apply for the failing schools currently under the auspices of the RSD? And would you apply for them to come back as traditional schools or as charters? And Woody, I'll start with you since I started with Jason last time.
Well, I think the way the law reads under Act 35, when Superintendent Pastorak, he's given charters that have reached a 75 SPS score the opportunity to return if they so desire. And at this point, as reading actually a nice interview in The Lens with some of those school leaders, and they're very adamant about not returning. The law is what it is, but I think when it comes right down to it, and I thought your article really spoke to that, is there's three things that charters are particularly interested in, and if they're going to return, it's finances, autonomy, and facilities. And I think over the past 4 years, you've seen the Orleans Parish School Board has operated in much more of a business-like manner and has given the public and charter leaders reason to believe in the Orleans Parish school system. And I think that in order for these schools to come back, we've got to earn that respect, and we've got to earn them back. We can't force anybody to come back, and the law is what it is.
Jason, would you like to respond to the question?
Yes. I would like to see some of the schools return on a per-school basis. Some schools have been under the RSD even before the storm. So before Act 35, there were some unperforming schools that were taken from the Orleans Parish School Board system, and they still aren't to the level that they're supposed to be in this last, I guess this will be 7 to 8 years. So those schools, we need to have a plan for them when they come back, and also have the resources to go in the classroom to double down on that K through 6 to bring them up to the level that they need to be so they can have a chance to go to any school throughout the city. Right now we have certain schools that are what we call last resort schools in the RSD, and those individuals can't go anywhere else, and so that's why they are at those schools. But I think if we give the resources to those schools, we'll be able to bring them up to code and up to a passing rate, and therefore then they'll have a brighter future. I don't think that we can take over all schools at one time. I think we need to phase them in, and we also need to give a good business plan and an autonomy to the charters that are currently operating so they will want to come back. You have to give them a reason to come back. And right now they're just sitting on the fence saying, well, when it's time we'll come back, or if the leadership changes in the school board, we will come back. So let's show them strong leadership, let's give them what they need to survive, and everybody will move forward together as one unit versus a system of schools and not a system run by the Orleans Parish School Board.
So I want to get around to the charter school movement itself. I want to talk strengths and I want to talk weaknesses, and I want to know what you two think about it. And Woody, I'll start with you. What do you think have been some of the charter school movement's strengths, and what do you think have been some of its weaknesses?
I think the strengths have been, well, it's hard to when you talk about charter schools, charter schools are like cars. There's Maseratis and there's Chevettes. We got a lot of, we have some Maseratis out there, and we got a lot of Chevettes. And we need to look at them as individuals. But I'll say overall, they've pushed down the decision-making process, particularly the academic decisions, down to the school level, which is good because you have a school leader, a principal, and teachers who can make academic decisions quickly, efficiently, and they know what's best for their particular classroom or their particular school community, whereas it may take some time for it to trickle upward to an administrative level. So I think from that point of view, they know their students better, they know what to do. On a weakness side, I'll say that, again, it goes from school to school. Some schools, I feel, have not done a very good job of having meetings in public. Sometimes the budgets aren't 100% clear to, the citizens out there. But that responsibility also falls back on the authorizer. And I feel like the Orleans Parish School Board has done a good job as being a strong authorizer. When things come up that are violations, if you will, of the charter contract, the school system is quick to respond to those and investigate and take action. And I think that's all you can expect. The system pre-Katrina was a lot different because you had all types of things that went on in traditional run Orleans Parish schools pre-Katrina, just as bad, if not worse, than the worst issue that's going on in a charter school today, and nothing was done about it. But, change takes time, but I think change has moved forward, and we can look and we can see that even some of the worst instances in charters over these past couple of years, whether it be financial improprieties or, the terrible allegations that went on at Abramson out in New Orleans East, I think both the Recovery School District and the OPSB in those cases were quick to respond and respond quickly to get something done. In the old days, there probably would have been a lot more hand-wringing to get around to solving the problem. The problem is by far from being solved, but I believe it's a step in the right direction.
Jason, what do you think are some of the charter school movement's strengths versus its weaknesses?
Well, some of the strengths are autonomy, giving the charter board and the administration the ability to operate their facility as they see fit and in guidelines with the state and local levels. The programming is more diverse, being able to give students more of a career path to their education or their training to further their career and not just give them a standardized textbook, but more in line with what they are comfortable and what they're striving to be. I also think the attitude. A lot of parents like the attitude of the charters and the uniforms and something new. They're really engaged, and let's keep that momentum going. Now, the innovation side is also where we need to look at what works at some charters and see if we can implement that throughout the system so that we can improve every school and not just have one charter operator who's successful that gets more schools, but help other schools continue and be able to grow and stay, within the system so that they can keep their certification. Now, there's some of the weaknesses. The community is not involved in some of these schools, and we're starting to see the community protests from the students at Walker and Cohen, and it's a serious issue if they don't feel like they are getting their piece of the pie, and they also are competing against other schools that are within the same school building, which has also been a problem for years. And those of us that are from New Orleans know that you can't just mix and match everybody together in the same building. Issues like Sophie B. Wright that were a positive school that the community liked and their charter was taken away. We need to have more of a system where we look at what the community wants based on just grade itself, because the community were supporting them, and I think the community would have kept their support for them. They would have got to that level eventually, not just a cutoff point. The support and wages for the workers within the school is an issue with the autonomy of the RSD and the charters. I think we do need to worry about the prevailing wages of individuals who are in the school system and make sure they have a quality of life so they can provide it for their child while they go to school and have everything that they need. And funding is an issue, and we have to make sure we stay on top of that to make sure the accountability is there and that they have everything across the board at a level that is universal. It's like McDonald's. Everywhere you go, a Big Mac is #1. And we need to make sure each school has that accountability with transportation, food services, and books.
So we're talking with school board candidates for the District 6, and this is Jessica Williams from The Lens. We're sitting here with Woody Koppel, the District 6 incumbent, and Jason Coleman, the challenger, who is the third-generation member of the Coleman Cab Company family. How you doing, everybody?
Doing great.
Fine.
So I want to move to the next question. And my last question was about the charter school movement's strengths and its weaknesses. And my second question, related to strengths and weaknesses, are what do you think are some of the Orleans Parish School Board strengths in the 4 years? Maybe you can speak to the time when you've served versus what do you think are some of the areas that it needs to improve on, Woody?
Well, I think, we talk about best practices, and we've been talking about lessons learned. And, over the past 4 years, we talk about, well, have we been implementing lessons learned from the charter schools into our traditional schools? And we have. One of the things that I thought we did, in the past, you had schools that would blow through their budget like nobody's business. And just, by the way, let's be real clear on the budget. The money comes from the state. We get about $8,300 per student from state and local tax sources. By statute, that money follows the child. It doesn't go anywhere else, can't go anywhere else. So depending on the number of students you have at a school, multiplied by that amount, that's what goes to the school. The only difference would be in charter schools, there's a 2% admin fee, which is to cover overhead for audits and all kinds of other things in regards to charter schools. So the money follows the child. And until Baton Rouge changes that, and the MFP has remained flat over the past 4 years, and despite having multiple school board members, multiple elected officials show up at Baton Rouge every single year, beg and plead to raise the MFP, it's remained flat. So we have to deal with the money we have. And in seeing that, in the past, you would have school sites that would blow through the budget. No offense to anybody, but there was always a safety net. Because you had such a large system, you could rob Peter to pay Paul. If a school ran $100,000 over budget, no big deal, they pulled it from somewhere else. But we changed that 4 years ago. What we did was we instituted zero-based budgeting, which every school and every department in the school system is structured after a site-based model. Everybody starts with zero and builds their budget accordingly. So if you're a school site leader, a principal, you know roughly, based on 8,300 times the number of students, how much money you have to spend within certain guidelines, because you have to staff your classrooms appropriately. And that's something from a positive point of view where we've given more autonomy to the school site leaders and allowed them to do what's best for the children.
Jason, do you want to respond on, in just your observation, what do you think are some of the Orleans Parish School Board strengths versus its weaknesses?
Number one, they did refinance the bond that saved us money, and we give credit for that. Overall, we think there's been too much politics played in the school system. A lot of votes have been 4-3 or 5-2, or with somebody in opposition basically not voting. We need to understand that we must educate the public on the process of the school board, have more community meetings within that area, maybe once a month, and people should know who their school board representatives are and what we do. The truth thing is that we must understand that we are over budget on several items, and that we are over the deadline on a lot of schools for renovations. I know McDonald 35 and Booker T. Washington and others, and we must keep accountable to the public that we said we're going to do something in the timeline and keep it going and not move the timeline or the deadline. And as far as planning for each child, for each building, we don't have a plan for every school in New Orleans, and we don't have the monies to complete the plan that we do have now. So I think under the last 4 years, we should have came up with that plan to put us forward, so that right now we'll be talking about, okay, this is your deadline, this is what you have something to look forward to. Currently, there are a lot of schools out there saying, well, what about me? And we have some call it shoring up the building, but it shouldn't be shoring up. Everybody should have the same standard across the board of an education facility. I went into AB Truro today and actually was there for Career Day. And the school looked a little bit like it looked 20 years ago when I was in school, just for a smart board being put in. So we have to make sure that every school looks alike. I don't care if it's Lusher or Ben Franklin, but every school, everywhere. Thank you.
My next question has to do with a collective bargaining agreement and the fact that there hasn't been one, at least for the Orleans Parish School Board and for most of the charters around the city, since before Katrina. I want to know, maybe Woody, if you could talk some about why you haven't pushed, or if you have pushed, let us know for more of a collective bargaining agreement. And if you haven't, then explain why not. And just talk generally about maybe why you think that hasn't come back in full form.
Well, that decision was made before I joined the board 4 years ago. And to be honest, it really hasn't come up. There have been smatterings of conversations about, why there is or why there isn't one. But when you look at the district as a whole, we have 12 charters, we have 6 traditionally run schools. So hiring and firing decisions are made at those school sites. We can't talk about autonomy for charter schools and autonomy for site-based decisions and then at the same time say we want a collective bargaining agreement that says that our school site leaders don't have that autonomy. But at this point, there really hasn't been any sort of conversation, any sort of movement to move in that direction. But if we're talking about moving a district to all charters, why would we be talking about moving forward with a collective bargaining agreement, just from a logical point of view?
Jason, do you also feel that a district that is all charter, there's no room for a collective bargaining agreement?
No, I think we have to have a collective bargaining agreement. It's how you're going to operate under the Orleans Parish School Board. If we don't have agreement, then everybody's going to keep doing what they are doing. And we have multiple administrators at the top. We have about 5 superintendents, and I don't know how many deputy superintendents between all the different schools and their charters in the state, and we have to come together to be able to say, we are wasting money at the top, and we'd be able to have a better streamline down to the bottom, put the resources in the classroom if we were better organized as a business plan. I don't care what corporation you look at, it doesn't look like this. And as far as the 16 schools that the Orleans Parish School was over, 2 of those other units are not schools, they're centers more or less. And basically, just like we operate now over the charters, we can operate over the other charters, just giving them the autonomy that they need, and there's going to be some give and take. And I think that conversation needs to happen, or should have had happened, and that's one of the things I plan on doing immediately, and have been in that conversation before. I think people need to know what they're expected to do, and then we'll make agreements and change whatever guidelines we need to have, but at least that conversation will be in writing, and everybody will know how to play the game by the rules. I will go to Baton Rouge, and I will fight with the individuals who are fighting for the return of the schools, and that our governance means something. If you're not going to bring back the schools, then I don't know why we would have a school board over just 16 schools and 2 centers. We have to understand we're elected for every child in every household by the constituents of New Orleans to serve, and we need to make sure we are serving them by protecting their children. Coin children right now would love to have leadership at the school board level, and that's our job to fight for it, and that's one of the things I would do, fight for every child.
So you would be in support of bringing back a collective bargaining agreement for Orleans Parish schools?
With the independent operators right now, an agreement needs to be made to bring them in to the Orleans Parish School Board authority. Currently, they're operating under the state, so I don't think they more or less don't want to come back. It's just that they don't know what they're going to get, and it's a give and take, and I think that's the conversation that needs to happen, or should have had happened before, so we would be at a better point right now knowing that next school year this is what we're going to have, and this is where we're going to be over maybe 25 schools next year and then 30 schools the following year. It's just working down the road to get every school back so that we can provide a good education for our children.
And I just want to be clear for the audience, when I say collective bargaining agreement, I am speaking about the teachers union. And I want to move to the next question because I don't want to spend too much time on that. But I want to know, and Jason, I'll start with you since I've been starting with Woody this whole time. But I want to know also, if you are elected, would you vote to roll forward the millage next year, and why or why not?
Well, number one, I would have to have a meeting with the constituents in my area to see what they are in favor of, because I'm representing them. But I will let them know what our concerns are and what the budgeting could be and what we could provide for if the millage moves forward, and let them make that decision. I personally, when I vote, I would like to vote for it as a person, but as a school board member, I would have to listen to them. And as far as the agreement with the schools and the school teachers, I think that goes with the unions, with the workers, with the service, with the bus drivers. Everything has to be contracted out, and those contracts have to be met, and those individuals deserve a certain quality of life. As a former, my mom's a former teacher and my grandmother as well, so teachers are very important, educators as I call them. They make a life commitment to our children. We should have a commitment to giving them the resources that they need. So when you talk about their bargaining agreement, you need to understand that if we give them what they need in the classroom, they may be able to give and take with us as far as what they're requiring as their income level.
Okay, I want to move to Woody and allow him a chance to answer the question.
What?
The original question was, if you were elected, would you vote to roll forward the millage next year, and why or why not?
I would be generally in favor of rolling it forward. We're going to have a public hearing on that matter, and I'm sure we'll hear both sides of the issue. the thing to keep in mind is, of all the tax revenues that come in, the Orleans Parish School Board only receives about 8% of that total windfall. Most of it goes through RSD and individual charters. So, this is a decision that needs to be made collectively with charter leaders and the Recovery School District, because those are the people who are going to really receive the lump sum, if you will, the benefit of that roll forward. And I mean, obviously, there's always, everybody always needs more money, and it would be, I guess, if you will, it would be selfish of the Orleans Parish School Board, because we're doing so well financially and we're trying to hold costs down, to withhold that extra revenue from our partners.
I want to get back to also what Jason mentioned earlier about some of the divisions that have been on the board in the past year. And Woody, maybe I'll start with you again. If you can just speak from experience, or maybe talk some about if you're elected again, how will you work to make sure that the divides that we see, the audience sees when going to the Orleans Parish School Board meetings, sort of bitter, just heated screaming matches, aren't happening again? And do you think that those things kind of create an image that prevents maybe schools from wanting to return, or erodes trust in the school board? I mean, maybe you can speak to
I think when you see those kind of actions, that does erode trust, particularly in schools that are thinking about returning because they think about their autonomy being threatened. But, let's be clear, the Orleans Parish School Board over the past 4 years has had almost 800 action items. Of those 800 action items, fewer than 15 have resulted in a non-7-0 vote. And a lot of this comes down to personalities. It comes down to difference of opinions. Some people don't want to move forward on something, and that's part of democracy. Democracy is not, is not a clean, hermetically sealed instrument. It's something it's gritty, it's dirty. Sometimes it's not straightforward. But I would think when you look at everything as a whole, and I know you've been to a lot of Orleans Parish School Board meetings, but I know you haven't been to every single meeting. But there's a lot of, people tend to see in the press, they see the flare-up, but they don't see the other 785 action items that were ho-hum. Like, for instance, we had a meeting last night, very lightly attended by a lot of people, because obviously the presidential debate was last night, and there were other things going on. No offense to anyone, but of the roughly 20 action items, all of them were 7-0, and there was hardly, there was no crosswords. But it kind of depends on the individual item, and I would like to particularly look more at the individual items. But a lot of it revolves around leadership and who's president and who's not president, and that's a personality thing.
Jason, do you want to respond to?
Well, yeah, and what is correct, it does depend on the action item. But when you disagree based on the policy of the action item versus the person's personality, there's two different things. I'm going to bring up two. The DBE program and local business program, that was an issue for the community, and that's part of the hoopla of why some people didn't like how it was handled, because certain people were on the fence or they were against making sure this was implemented at the time it should have been implemented before any monies went out, and how many millions of dollars should have been put into New Orleans versus outside of New Orleans. And currently we're still operating, I think, less than 50% inside New Orleans, and the monies to go with those contracts. And another one was very important, was the superintendent intern position, which clearly HR says what the superintendent has to be qualified for, which our current superintendent is not. And it doesn't say interim superintendent, it just says superintendent, because that still is the position you're in. It just makes you understand that that person is not permanently put there. But his qualifications do that meet the standard right now, and I think that shows for leadership of the school system right now. And those are the issues of recently that have been those split in votes. And I think it's very important for us to understand that when we disagree, it's disagree based on the principle of the issue and not personality. Those are clear things that we must move forward as a city and make sure we follow the law and do what's best for our constituents, because economics is just as important as education. If you don't provide somebody with a place to live and how to raise their children with the monies, then you can't talk about education till you feed and shelter them. So I think at that point, we need to understand why we're here and work for the betterment of the whole city, not just one in particular group, and that's kind of what's going on.
What do you see as the biggest problem, if you could sum it up, in New Orleans education? And if you were elected, how would you work towards solving it? If there's more than one problem, try to be as specific as possible. And what do y'all start with?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest issues is early childhood education. The Orleans Parish School Board started the Mahalia Jackson Early Childhood Learning Center. But one of the issues with the center is not the center itself, but the funding that the state provides for LA4 and for pre-K. So every year we have to, if you will, wrangle around to find extra money in order to make that center basically to be able to function. And one of the ways is, we have to keep adding more MFP eligible grades, which is great, but the whole idea of creating an early childhood center is to start, all of our younger children there and get them up to the 2,500 word vocabulary by the time they hit kindergarten. It provides about $4,000 per child as opposed to the $8,000 it provides for children. It makes it very difficult to make ends meet, if you will. And I think that one of our biggest issues is children entering kindergarten and first grade without the 2,500 word vocabulary, because once they show up without that, we spend a tremendous amount of time catching that up. And that doesn't matter if it's a traditional New Orleans public school or charter school, everybody has the same issue. And if you look around and you look at the way charters are formed, very few have pre-Ks, and the ones that do usually have to put some, have to collect money from parents or work. It's very hard to get the funding together for the pre-K, and until we solve that problem, we have a long way to go.
And how would you work towards? Would it take lobbying?
I think it would take increased lobbying. I mean, part of it's going to have to be identifying something in the state budget that can be eliminated, or my idea would be is partially also is trying to better fund also special needs, and having the exceptionalities and the money associated with those exceptionalities follow the child the same way the MFP funding does right now. And in doing that, I think we could incentivize charters particularly to specialize and take more children with special needs, and kind of get some economies of scale. But I think there's some, we need to kind of look a little bit tighter. And to be honest, I haven't identified where in the state budget you could find this extra money, because everything is being cut at this point. But one way or the other, we're going to pay for it, because we pay for the money. We pay for those children when they reach first grade to remediate them up to the 2,500 word vocabulary.
Jason, what do you think is the biggest problem facing New Orleans education right now? And if you are elected, how would you work to solve it?
Okay, well, what is absolutely correct? It is funding, it is resources. If we were able to have a certified teacher program for pre-K 3 through 6th grade, which have the resources within the classroom, we could be a lot more farther as far as test scores. I think we'll probably be in the 90 range if we had that. But currently, I only know about 2 in my area that actually have a pre-K 3, and one of them you have to pay for. And you pay for it in the beginning of the year. My child goes to Audubon, so I know about that program. But we need to double down in that classroom from pre-K 3 to 6th grade with a teacher that's certified and a teacher's aide to be able to give the resources to those students at their early point of stage, and they will be farther along, and I think our test scores and our graduation rate will go up, and not only just getting a GED, but actually finishing school and having a career path. I think it's so important. And far as how do we get there, yeah, we're going to have to go to state and be able to say, hey, look, this is what is needed, this is what is working, and have those people in education say, okay, this is what we can do this year, this is what we can do next year. Maybe we can increase it one school at a time, or maybe outsource that to some agencies that do have early start, but not just on the level that they are currently providing on, but actually have a higher standard for the teachers or who they're hiring to be able to provide those resources to the students.
Jason, I'll start with you. We're at the point where we need to get to the closing statements. I want to offer you a chance to, tell the listeners and the readers of The Lens what makes you uniquely qualified to hold this seat.
Well, I called it an activist. Since the 2nd grade, I've been elected to the Student Government Association, and I joined Diabet Borrego at McDonald 35, Southern University, and has served as the past president of Southern University Alumni New Orleans and current vice president of 35 Alumni and building chair. I've been working with the school board on several issues, and I understand what it takes. I understand the commitment to the community, and I'm just trying to eliminate the politics and put the children first. At the end of the day, you can trust that I am who I say I am, and I'm going to do what I need to do for the community's sake. I'm going to tell you the truth, and we'll have to deal with the facts, and we can make those decisions together to make a better future for New Orleans. Education is the foundation for every great civilization. New Orleans is no different, and we must put emphasis on education, and I think this next 4 years will be critical to our renewal and keeping going with the education reform. It's funny that we say reform because actually we're going back to what my dad and mom taught about 40 years ago with workshop and career tech. So we're going to make sure we give them options, school and career. I'm Jason Coleman, number 89, www.electjasoncoleman.com. Thank you for having me.
Woody, I'll offer you the chance. I'll offer you the floor.
Thanks for having us here today. My name is Woody Koppel, and I served as a teacher in the Orleans Parish School Board for 7 years. I taught first grade. In addition to that, I've run a successful real estate business for the past 20 years, and I felt like those unique experiences, having worked on the front lines in education, teaching children to read, hundreds of children to read, has uniquely qualified me to serve on this board. I served as president of this board for 2 years, and over the past 4 years, you've seen amazing results. We do have the highest graduation rate in the state, 95% cohort graduation rate. We have the highest special needs graduation rate in the state. We've gone from 17th in the state academically to number 2 in the state academically. We have also finances. We've turned the financial house around. 4 years ago, the school system was almost $400 million in bond indebtedness. Under my leadership as president, I led the charge to get rid of surplus property that was not being used. I led the charge to tighten down all these budgets and to institute zero-based budgeting, which resulted in being able to go to the bonding agencies and get a better bond rating for the Orleans Parish School Board, which enabled us to, if you will, shorten the repayment time on our debt, saving the district $22 million. Today, we owe about $240 million. So we've paid from $400 million in debt to almost $240, which I think is admirable, particularly in a down economy. And we've worked very hard on implementing the master plan. Is the master plan perfect? No, it's not. But are we getting things done? Yes, we are. And we're doing it within the confines of a responsible, business-like manner. When we don't have enough money to do something, we pull back, but we work hard. And I hope you'll consider me on November 6th. This is Woody Koppel from the Orleans Parish School Board.
Thank you so much for coming out, you guys. I really appreciate it, and WWNO appreciates it as well. That's the end of the forum.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.